Up next, House File 4845, Representative Hollins. As Rep. Hollins is moving to the table, she will move that House File 4845 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2026 tax bill. Welcome to your committee. Representative Hollins, please proceed with your bill.
Thank you, Chair Gomez, Chair Davids, and committee members. This is a pretty simple bill. It modernizes Minnesota income tax structure and strengthens local government funding by updating tax brackets, adding a new top-tier tax bracket for highest earners, and increasing state aid to cities and counties. The bill adjusts Minnesota's individual income tax brackets upwards across all filing statuses to reflect inflation and introduces a new fifth tax bracket with a 10.85% rate on high income earners. So those are folks who earn over $1 million for joint filers with lower thresholds for other filers. It updates the inflation adjustment baseline year to 2026, ensuring future bracket adjustments remain accurate. In addition, the bill significantly increases local government aid and county program aid to counties beginning in 2026, providing expanded resources for local services. It also requires the Department of Revenue to recertify aid distributions to reflect those changes. And I heard there's a lot of people who want to talk about it, so I'll cede my time to them.
Thank you, Representative Hollins. With that, we will move to testifiers. First up, Mayor Herr, welcome back to the committee. Please proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kali Herr, and I'm the Mayor of St. Paul. I appreciate the opportunity to come this morning to support Representative Hollins' bill, House File 4845. This bill is a bill that is near and dear to my heart, as I was the chief author of the fifth-tier bill when I was here at the legislature, and I really appreciate how Representative Hollins has really honed in how these funds will get get used. St. Paul's two largest general fund revenue sources are property taxes and LGA. Unlike sales tax and income tax relied upon by state budget, property taxes and LGA do not automatically grow with the economy. St. Paul's costs continue to grow. However, with inflationary pressures, we do not have any increases with LGA to support that. For example, with just healthcare costs, utilities, capital repairs, that drives us up our cost every year. For just our police and fire departments alone, it's projected to grow $7 million in 2026. This gap creates a big gap for cities' cost to pay for basic services. And I think a couple of our House members were rescued by our fire department from one of the elevators not too long ago. That lots of people use our city services, and those all fall on the taxpayers of St. Paul. I think that it is important to illustrate the need for this bill and its importance. I think, as many of you already know, that up until 2007, LGA met the city's needs, and since then the gap has just widened every year. The 43% of our need based on the LGA formula is not actually met. Based on the LGA formula, we should be getting, as a city, $146 million, and the city of St. Paul gets $82 million. Should be getting $82 million in 2026. That's only 50% funding for our total unmet need, and St. Paul actually has the highest unmet need in the state and the biggest gap between the unmet need and the LGA received. And so we really greatly appreciate Representative Hollins' bill and the ability to impact our LGA in a positive way. We do know that other cities and mayors have the same story as St. Paul, and you have letters from city organizations and counties in your packet today, and I encourage you all to include this in your omnibus bill. So thank you so much for giving me time to testify today.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Mayor Herr. Up next is Britt Anbacht. Welcome to the committee. Thanks for being with us. Please introduce yourself as you get started.
Good morning, Co-Chair Gomez and Co-Chair Davids and members of the committee. My name is Britt Anbacht. I live in Minneapolis. I'm here today as a board member of Neighbors for Neighbors. We organize for Minnesota, where every Minnesotan can find a home they love and can afford where they want to live. I'm here today to testify in opposition to House File 4845. I share the author's desire for a new fifth bracket with a progressive taxation schedule. I think it is important that all Minnesotans pay their fair share to ensure our collective well-being. But I'm very concerned that the money is destined to be distributed to cities that do not share the vision of collective well-being. While some cities, like St. Paul, have made changes to their zoning codes in order to allow more homes, many cities have not. And for example, in 2023, this body passed historic funding for new housing projects, money that has not and cannot be spent because there's nowhere to where it is legal to build the new homes this legislature funded. Cities continue to uphold policies that enshrine economic and racial segregation by preventing new homes from being built or requiring large homes on large lots, the most expensive home type. That exclusion of new homes increases individual property taxes by preventing new neighbors from sharing the city's expenses. We want a Minnesota where people take care of their neighbors, but many cities only allow acceptable new neighbors, like senior living developments. Even then, approval processes prevent most new homes from being built without 3 or more years of process and delay before even breaking ground. If we want to be a growing and thriving state, we cannot continue to allow mayors and city officials to deny homes and exclude our fellow Minnesotans from calling their city home. Please don't increase the funding for cities that do not allow our taxes to house our neighbors. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Up next, Dalton Danielson. Welcome to the committee. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, my name is Dalton Danielson, Fiscal Policy Director with the Minnesota Business Partnership. I'm here today to respectfully oppose House File 4845. And while we understand the LGA and other needs included in this bill, we have concerns that this proposal relies on a new, higher individual income tax rate that risks undermining Minnesota's competitiveness without directly addressing cost of living or cost of business pressures, and will make Minnesota less competitive for business and the talent that comes with it. House File 4845 establishes a new fifth-tier income tax rate of 10.85%, applying to higher income earners, including many small business owners who pay personal income taxes through the individual code. For employers competing nationally for talent and for entrepreneurs deciding where to grow, the cumulative impact of higher top-tier taxes makes Minnesota a more challenging place to invest, hire, and expand. Members, talent matters. In this bill, we're talking about a potential barrier to bringing in top talent in all industries. We're talking about the top doctors, the top lawyers, the top business professionals, the top entrepreneurs, and other specialized services. Finally, we believe there are other ways to strengthen local finances and address the cost of living, the cost of business, without further increasing the tax burden on income, particularly at a time when Minnesota already has one of the higher top marginal rates in the country. For these reasons, we respectfully urge the committee to oppose House File 4845. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Up next, Kenneth Garnier. Welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself as you get started with your testimony.
Good morning, Chair Gomez, Co-Chair Davids, and members of the committee. My name is Kenneth Winslow Gagne, and I am the Vice President of AFSCME Local 34 in Hennepin County. We represent almost 2,800 members that work at the county in social services. I'm a human service representative. I've worked for the county for 14 and a half years, and I'm here today to express AFSCME Council 5 support for House File 4845. And I want to thank the Representative Hollins for bringing this forward. My profession at its core is helping people get services that they need to live with dignity and respect in Hennepin County. We believe that we can address gaps in society by paying a little bit more to guarantee everyone a decent standard of living. This work is inherently about redistributing some resources from those that can afford to help a little bit, and we can pick up those that need a little bit of help. Because I work in human services and I'm a frontline worker, I really see the impacts of what these services do to people, do for people in the community. And the legislator has the ability to distribute resources and help counties with program aid and local government aid. Counties and cities receive some financial assistance that's based on need. Counties that have an older population or more residents on SNAP get more CPA so that we can have the number of people required to get the resources to those that are eligible for them. This is a vital revenue for all 87 counties. And we also know that this is insufficient to meet our needs, and that the cost of everything will be increasing in coming months. So given the impact that the HR 1 is going to have on counties that administer our social safety net, we need the legislator to consider how we're going to meet the new requirements to increase determination frequency and also reduce SNAP error rates. Without some intervention, it will be county property taxpayers who bear the brunt of paying for benefits of administration, and it will be disproportionate. So by creating a fifth-tier income tax, you can alleviate the taxes working people pay and improve access to public programs. So we encourage you to pass House File 4845. And thank you, Representative Hollins, for this bill. And thank you, members, for considering my testimony today.
Thank you for your testimony, Kevin Garnier, and thank you for your work. Brian Cook. Welcome to the committee. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chair Gomez, members of the House Tax Committee. My name is Brian Cook. I'm the Director of Tax, Fiscal Policy, and Elections for the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber represents more than 6,300 businesses of all sizes in all corners of the state who employ more than 500,000 or 500 million, half a million employees. Sorry. Thank you for the opportunity to share concerns with Representative Hollins, House File 4845. The bill seeks to provide cities and counties with additional state aids by imposing a new fifth-tier individual income tax rate of 10.85%. In doing so, it would undermine Minnesota's economic competitiveness by making our tax environment even less attractive for businesses and harm talent, recruitment, and retention. The vast majority of businesses in this state pay taxes through the individual income tax. A number of these businesses could then face a substantial tax increase under the bill. I'd also point out these are the same businesses facing $400 to $500 million in increased federal taxes this year as a result of the expiration of the state's PTE tax. Employees and businesses have choices, and increasing Minnesota's already high tax rates would put us at a clear disadvantage. Since 2021, 26 states governed by both Republicans and Democrats have cut individual income tax rates, corporate tax rates, or both. Minnesota currently has the 6th highest top income tax rate in the country, and the workforce has never been more mobile. The fifth-tier rate proposed in this bill would bump us past Oregon and New Jersey to 4th place, where we would only be 0.05% behind New York for 3rd place, 0.15% behind Hawaii for 2nd, and 2.45% behind California for 1st. We would be a full 3.2% above our next highest tax neighbor in Wisconsin, with other bordering states being 7% or more less. We also have concerns that using a fifth-tier rate could exacerbate some of the problems that it is trying to solve. One of the many reasons that local governments are being strained is the reduction in the valuation of commercial properties. Commercial properties are less valuable when they don't have businesses to fill them. We're already a high-cost state to do business in, and a new fifth-tier rate would be yet another barrier for business investment in Minnesota, which would have a negative impact on building occupancy. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Up next, Eric Harris-Bernstein. Welcome to the committee. Sorry, I didn't give you guys any warning of who was on deck.
It was buried back there.
Please proceed with your testimony.
Chair Gomez, members of the committee, my name is Eric Bernstein, and I'm the director of We Make Minnesota. We're a labor grassroots coalition working on state tax and budget issues. Thanks for the opportunity to share our perspective on HF 4845, which would create a 5th income tax bracket for high earners and use the majority of the revenues to increase LGA and CPA. We appreciate the effort in this bill to raise revenue from those who can afford it and use that money for important public services that we all depend on. This bill would increase taxes on less than the top 1% of all earners. The state doesn't have statistics on this small group, but households earning $500,000 a year pay a total effective tax rate of 11.7% compared to 12.5% for middle-income households. Minnesota has been very good to these households, and I think it's appropriate that they pay a little bit more to make sure everyone has their needs met. This bill also touches on an important theme in Minnesota politics, which is the relationship between state and local funding. The Minnesota Miracle moved our state towards a more cooperative approach, where higher state revenues are redistributed to equalize resources for local governments. However, in subsequent decades, the state abandoned that promise, leaving local governments to make up the difference. This bill would help restore the ethos of the Minnesota Miracle and relieve rising property tax burdens, which are prominent across the state. More broadly, this bill demonstrates the universal public investment needs demonstrated by support, public investment needs across our state, which is demonstrated by 31 new local option sales tax proposals this year, costing more than $1.3 billion over the next few decades. Our coalition believes that Minnesota has the ability to meet these needs if we're able to have a more clear-eyed and open-minded conversation about a strong tax code. This session, we have supported a number of proposals that would improve our tax code and create revenue for these needs that we seem to all agree on. So we appreciate this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your testimony. That's the end of folks who signed up to testify. Is there anyone else present who wishes to testify on House File 4845? Not seeing any. We'll move to member discussion. Representative Joy?
Thank you, Chair. And I understand and I appreciate us trying to get the LGA and CA increased. I do appreciate that. Creating another tax bracket doesn't work for me, especially when we saw the February and March estimates were down $126 million in individual income tax that came in. I think we're losing that money, and now we're going to create another bracket to try to fill that gap. I think one of the things we should be looking at here is if we want to fill LGA and CPA with more money, instead of taxing people, we should look at the cannabis tax. We raised it from 10 to 15%, and we took away the cities and the LGAs, and we took away that. So we should look at giving them back maybe 5% of that money to CAs and LGAs. That's what we should be looking at, because that money's there today. This isn't trying to tax somebody as we see our revenues went down $126 million. As we continue to finish up the tax committee this year, there is a theme, raising taxes. That's what the theme is. When's enough enough? We got to go after millionaires and billionaires. We haven't even passed pass-through entity tax, which is zero fiscal costs. We just continue and continue targeting earners and picking winners and losers. And I think this is the wrong way. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill forward in the discussion. LGA and CPA, before I got elected, obviously, I had to look into it. I didn't even know what it was for. But when you go back and look at it, it was meant to serve a problem. High property taxes. It was put into place where there was issues. So here we are nearly 50 years later, because I believe it was put in the early mid-70s, and we're still dealing with the same issue, which means after all this time, we haven't solved the problem. And when we say we need to stick more into LGA and CPA, we're also saying that our property taxes are probably too high, which in this state, we are literally driving people and businesses out. Not my opinion. If you look at the IRS's data and the adjusted gross income that has left this state, which is well documented, we're looking at billions of dollars. So a bill like this that hits that top tier, once again, those are the people that can leave. Those are the people that do leave. That's once again documented. 50 to 70% of that adjusted gross income is in those top earners. They will simply leave. And anybody in the tax committee, I'm sure, has heard me talk about The Economist, and I'm sure most people are well aware of the Laffer curve. There is a diminishing return after a certain point. We have gone beyond that point. We have gone over that point. We are overtaxing our citizens in this state. We do not have a taxing problem in this state. We have a spending problem in this state. We have a problem with $9 billion worth of fraud in this state. If we want to fix our problems with LGA CPA, I would suggest that we heavily go after the fraud and minimize our spending in this government before we look at taxing our citizens more. If this was a business, we would obviously be looking at returns and input, output, and saying, yep, something needs to change here. But it doesn't seem like we're taking this fraud issue seriously, because $9 billion worth of fraud, and how much of that have we clawed back? And yet the only thing we're talking about is raising more taxes. So I'm sorry, but this bill does not serve the purpose, and it does not bring attention to what we should be dealing with, and that is the massive amounts of fraud that have been perpetrated in this state. Thank you.
Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I hear what you're saying, Representative Wiener. I appreciate your comments. If anybody knows about high property taxes, it's the citizens of St. Paul, where we have a significantly higher property tax rate than the vast majority of the state of Minnesota. We are feeling a pinch like you cannot believe. But that's part of the reason why we're bringing this forward, is because there are people who are not paying their fair share. And the reality is this mostly benefits greater Minnesota, which is why we're hearing people oppose it, because most of the high earners in the state of Minnesota are within the metro area. They are in Minneapolis and St. Paul and the western suburbs of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And if we are able to bring that new tax rate in and then put it to LGA, that helps the people in your district pay less property taxes. So actually, this is a win for your people. The people who should be opposing it are the folks who represent Minnetonka and Wayzata and those areas, because they're the ones that would be disproportionately impacted by it.
Representative Roach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for House Research. What is the total allocation for LGAs in the state? Do we know that number?
Mr. Swanson, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair and Representative Roach, the total annual appropriation for LGA is just over $644 million.
Mr. Roach, or, geez, okay, I'm really batting a thousand here. Representative Roach.
Okay, thank you. So the problem that, I just heard from Representative Hollins is that this benefits some of the rural communities. But I'm looking at the numbers here, and since 2015, there has been well, first of all, the $644 million based on this this bill, this proposal, nearly 1/3 of the entire LGAs in the entire state would be allocated to 2 cities in the entire state. 1/3. So to say that this is impacting greater Minnesota is, I think, disingenuous. When I look at numbers here, the largest community in my district has continued to have decrease in their LGAs, while Minneapolis has increased, based on this, and St. Paul, nearly double. So the people of my community get 0, even with this new proposal. So it's not benefiting the great people of Farmington and the large part of my district. But we're seeing a 27% increase for St. Paul. $104 million in LGAs for St. Paul. Minneapolis, an 18% increase. Almost $97 million. I'm sorry, but if I'm going to use the language from my colleagues on the other side, this isn't equitable. Not in any way, shape, or form. So if we're going to be serious about helping people and saving their property taxes, the reason why Minneapolis and St. Paul is struggling with the increased property taxes is because of policies that are being put on them through a trifecta that is negatively impacting their ability to pay their property taxes with unfunded mandates. So if we're going to be honest about giving people help paying their property taxes, how about we actually stop mandating an umbrella approach to all 87 counties, a one-size-fits-all model? This is not a fix. This is a campaign strategy to try to get rural members to take a bad vote. It's disingenuous, and I don't support this.
As a reminder, this bill is being laid over. Representative Hollins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to bring that up. Not a bad vote to take, because there is no vote being taken. But what I will say is the majority of tax revenue comes from the metro area and flows outwards into the rest of the state. And that is factual. That is just pure fact. We have population density. We have the majority of millionaires and billionaires live within the Twin Cities and within the metro area. And so we would love to just keep our money and keep it here in the city of St. Paul, but that's not how income taxes work in the state. It is not the way, You've seen Summit Avenue. It'd be nice to keep that money here. That would be fantastic. We need help with our roads. We need help with our schools. We need help with everything. But the reality is that's not how the system works. And so if you would like to propose a tax situation where each individual city or county gets to keep their own taxes, I would be happy to support that.
Thank you, Representative Hollins. Up next, Representative Hewitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wasn't really going to talk on this, but now I'm kind of forced to. Most of you know that in the last, well, basically in the last 8 years I've been here, I've been working on how do we find a possible funding source for EMS? Because it's happening. What the Honorable Mayor of St. Paul didn't mention is last year when she wasn't in charge, the city of St. Paul had to write off $800 million and EMS services that could not be paid. And it shows the demographic of what St. Paul is going towards as a Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement fund. Many of the districts in my friends across the aisle are in that same situation of a Medicare, Medicaid fund. This money, you know, the LGA is one of the areas we looked at real closely to see if that could fund it. You are in trouble. We all are in trouble because our cities are starting to have issues with their public services. I don't know if it's a fifth tier. I don't know what it is, but something has to be done because we won't just be trying to look at how we're going to save Hennepin County. We will be looking at you not having a response time of 3 hours for an ambulance. And so I really regret when, I'm sorry, my good friend Representative Roach says that this does not benefit Farmington. Where did you drive to today from Farmington? You drove to St. Paul. If somebody hit your car on the way here, St. Paul Fire is going to respond to that. And we forget that yeah, the core cities, sure, they need our help, but we all use them, even to this day. And so I think we got to take a deep breath in a bipartisan way and figure out where we're going to raise this. And then I also work with the business community real close. The businesses are coming. They are coming regardless what we're hearing the rhetoric. I have a number of them coming into Rosemount that are really big businesses. The reason they're coming here is because of our schools, because some of our kids can graduate from high school and be able to work in these environments right away. So, you know, we talk about where can we make the cuts? Is it in education? Is it to our seniors? Is it to our values that both of us value on both sides of the aisle? I don't know. And that's one of the biggest questions when someone comes to me and says, oh, just cut 2% across the board. Where is that cut going to be? And I know, and I regret the fact that I'm hearing that we have done nothing about fraud, because we have. And I think you should check your data, because I had the number, but I don't have it. We have clawed back money. You heard of 20 different places that were raided. The governor brought it up last night. We are working on that together. This is systemic from a decade ago. And I think, yeah, there's some money there, but it's not going to save all of our LGA, because I want to go snowmobiling, I want to go water skiing in different places in your districts, and I want to make sure that I'm not waiting 2 hours for an ambulance or 2 hours for any kind of public service. So I get real frustrated when we get in this. You can tell I'm a little emotional about it, but it's about you and I. And so we really need to come up with a solution. Is it this? I'm not opposed to anything like this. So thank you, Madam Chair, for my rant.
Thank you, Representative Hewitt. Up next, Representative Anderson.
I won't rant.
You never would, Rep. Anderson.
I just want to remind, that a lot of this is caused by the mandates that we've created, this legislature has created and put on cities and counties. And cities and counties are suffering because of that. And we have to recognize that there's only so much money around. And you can't keep passing programs and asking either state taxpayers or property taxpayers or sales taxpayers to continue to pay these bills. This is one of my favorite little quotes, and I think we need to be reminded about this. And it's from Margaret Thatcher. Just as the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. And I think that that is what's happening here in the state. And if we continue on this path where we're expanding government dramatically, we are raising taxes dramatically. Now we're talking about wealth taxes. Now we're talking about fifth-tier taxes. If we continue this, we're going to run out of other people's money. Because first of all, people with money are going to leave. They already are leaving. In fact, 80% of the tax brackets, people are leaving. You know, every tax bracket except the bottom tax bracket, people are leaving. That is the IRS data from the last year. And so people are leaving. And that's a bad, bad thing for the state. Really bad. But we can't continue this until we just end up, you know, broke. But I think that's what's happening, and that's what's gonna happen. So I think we should take the words, you know, take the advice from Prime Minister Thatcher, and remember that dollars, you know, don't grow on trees. So, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if that was a rant. We'll have to decide.
It was not.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
It wasn't a rant. I have a good
It was
tax
a
bill
wonderful
tomorrow
rant.
for
Oh, okay.
raise money, so.
All right, tax quotes. Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Gomez and Representative Hollins. This is an interesting bill as to how to raise funds for local government aid. And LGA and CPA, it's very important to our cities and counties that we serve in my district. You know, it helps balance their budgets. They say that it lowers property taxes, although sometimes I say it needs to show up on my property statement, you know, for me to say, yes, you do lower that. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. And the aid also helps these local jurisdictions to cover all the requirements that we pass at the legislature. And there are quite a few. When I was a county commissioner, at the end of the room, there was this bookcase, and it had all the volumes of all the statutes and bills that passed since we became the state. And sometimes it was somewhat irritating to see the volume after volume of all the bills that have been passed. My recommendation, and I would be in favor of, is looking at some of these unfunded mandates that we require counties and cities to fulfill, and to see if there are some of them that we can start rolling back to help these local governments, you know, and what that they do. I mean, that may be a little bit difficult, but I would be in favor of at least looking at what those could be, because maybe some of these mandates have been on for decades and they no longer do what they were originally intended to do. So that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative Harder. Representative Smith.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This probably is going to be a rant. Several times, my colleagues have said today, let's be serious about this. So let's sit back and let's talk about this here. We all agree, because we've talked about this in this committee, that rising property taxes are an extremely important issue to every single Minnesotan, right? We're on the same page there. All right, so how do we get to helping Minnesotans with rising property taxes? As all of you know, the state does not levy local property taxes. That in Minnesota is done by counties and cities. They decide on that levy based on their budget. Cities and counties have done this multiple times. Their costs are rising. And we can talk about a lot of different reasons that it's rising. I would point out to the federal government H.R. 1 that has heaped all kinds of responsibilities onto the state administratively and given them no money to do that, and all the federal savings they gave to the wealthiest Americans. But maybe we can just disagree on that, but the fact is that the property taxes are rising. Okay, how do we help? Well, we can give targeted property tax relief, which is a bill we just heard and was voted down by every single Republican colleague that was in the room, which is not very many. And then we heard this bill, which will give LGA and CPA to counties and cities. It is funding to the counties and cities. So you cannot complain about unfunded mandates and then talk against a bill that would help fund the cities and counties that are doing those mandates. What? Makes no sense. We're giving them funding through CPA and through LGA. And if you want to talk about Margaret Thatcher and we're going to run out of other people's money. Do you know what those other people, those people who are making, let me see, hold on, what is this bill? Married couples making over $1 million or single people making over $600,000. With their money, those people are engaging in space races for fun. And we're saying that local people in rural Minnesota have to wait 3 hours for an ambulance because we can't take any of that money. Because they can't contribute to the state of Minnesota more. That is ridiculous. I might also point out the one specific funding mechanism that was mentioned here was the cannabis tax. In 2025, the cannabis tax raised $25 million total, which is, and this is true, less than $311 million that this bill would give to CPA and LGA. So we are serious about this problem. We want to help our cities, and we need to make sure that the wealthiest among us are contributing to society so that we can have local governments that are well-funded. Thank you, Representative Hollins, for this bill.
All right, thank you. Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Hollins. We chatted a little about this. I very much support the concept of this bill, which is a more equitable tax system and one where we're taking a holistic view to make sure that we're funding essential public needs. We're not putting too much pressure on local property taxpayers and have huge disparities in terms of what that burden looks like. I think that's a worthy goal. What I do take issue with, or think at least needs more interrogation, is if LGA is the chief mechanism to deliver on that goal. You know, as Representative Hewitt mentioned, the EMS need, our needs to rebuild our infrastructure and roads, housing. Why not perhaps take a more direct approach and fund those direct outcomes? Because I think the outcomes are the critical piece for us here. And to lower property taxes, another direct outcome that we could look at doing. And I think that LGA has an important role. But cities do not have a perfect track record of delivering on those outcomes. And so we should just have a serious conversation about what our state resources are delivering. And to this end, I also take some issue with raising additional taxes, giving them to cities, knowing that year over year, they're using tax dollars to increase the amount of dollars they're spending on legislative lobbying, us here. Do you know that last year, our large city groups, powerful groups, spent north of $2 million of people's tax dollars just to lobby the legislature? Yeah. That's more than big pharma, that's more than big oil. And you know, often that kind of lobbying is usually having one hand out for more money from the state and the other to fight for a status quo that's often making this property tax issue worse. And so, you know, as others have mentioned, there's an important relationship that we have to have and partnership between the city and the state level. And LGA certainly should be a part of that conversation. But if we are going to raise new revenue, I think we just need to integrate more if LGA is the sole or the main way to get to these outcomes that I think we all share.
Thank you, Chair Howard. Is there any further discussion before we go to Chair Davids to wrap us up? Representative Lee.
Yes, very quickly. Thank you, Madam Chair. As a member from St. Paul and Ramsey, I just want to make sure that we correct the record because we started discussion with misunderstandings of what LGA and CPA does. I know we have new members of the tax committee here, and so I just want to make sure folks understand that the CPA formula actually penalizes large counties like Ramsey and Hennepin, and so our residents in Ramsey County actually pay more money into state revenues than they get back through CPA and LGA distributions. So it is absolutely true that like this LGA CPA formula is the way that the state equitably makes sure that regardless of which county you live in, you get social services from the city or the county, and it redistributes that wealth in a way that really disadvantages people who live in St. Paul and Hennepin. And so it's not that Representative Hollins is bringing this bill to benefit just the metro. This bill actually benefits everyone, and everyone has runs in their packets on the increase to city budgets and county budgets here. And so if you just look at the first page of the county runs, Anoka County, Carver, Scott, and Washington County, they all get an increase to their CPA that's actually higher than the percentage increase to Ramsey or Hennepin. And so I want to make sure folks understand that. And I think the two things that I take issue the most in this conversation is that we're actually getting net migration into Minnesota. I think there was a qualifier that maybe some higher income folks may be leaving, but on net, we are definitely getting more people in Minnesota because it's a good place to live. We've made Minnesota a place where people want to raise their families because we've increased the child tax credit and passed paid leave. But most important, as someone who cares about economics, I want to make sure folks understand that the Laffer curve and just Laffer's work has actually been shown to be actually quite lazy. There's this talking point that when you don't tax people, like your job creation increases like 62%, but that's actually been debunked because it takes an average of job growth in I think 7 or 9 states. And so I want to make sure folks understand that when we're quoting economic theory, we're actually reading the assumptions and understanding what that means. But the important part is averages here, right? And I want to make sure folks understand this bill equitably funds all counties across Minnesota. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Representative Elkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll keep this brief. Also
We have to
wanted-
get to Representative Smith's bill. I think we'll have good discussion on that one too, 1041.
Yeah. No, I'm an economist by education. I'm also, like Representative Lee and probably Representative Robbins, very familiar with Arthur Laffer's famous curve drawn on the napkin. But as Representative Lee points out, there has never been any empirical evidence that reducing tax rates increases revenue or vice versa within the range of tax rates that we have anywhere in the country right now. And to the other point I wanted to raise is that Representative Wiener has observed we've had the local government aid program forever and ever in this state designed to address this problem. However, in 2003, LGA rates were slashed in order to balance the state budget. Basically, the state balanced its budget that year by slashing aid to cities, counties, and school districts, which is why anytime you're seeing a financial graph from one of your school districts, they always use 2003 as the baseline year because that's the year aids to local governments were slashed. And graphs of state, local government and school district revenues since then show a very clear relationship between reductions in state aid and its corresponding increases in levies for school districts and property tax rates for cities and counties.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion before we go to Chair Davids and then Rep. Hollins to wrap us up? Not seeing any. Chair Davids.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think I said some time ago, does this bill get us closer to agreement or further away? We have 17 days left. Does this bill get us closer to a deal or put us further away? I would argue that this puts us way further away. And as far as, I'm very disappointed we're actually not voting on this, but I respect you, Madam Chair, and it'll be laid over. But I wanted to vote on this thing. Oh, man. What a great vote this is for our side of the aisle over here. 5th income tax tier, amazing. Class warfare, that's all this is. This is class warfare. Somebody has something and then somebody that doesn't have it wants it. Okay, that's the way this works. And it's been going on for a very, very long time. I'm going to make a quote here and you have to tell me who said it. You don't help the poor by hurting the rich. Who said that? Isn't it Abraham Lincoln attributed to that one?
I think Kirk Dowd said it.
It was actually the Reverend William J.H. Betker, a Presbyterian minister, said that, and he's so right. You don't help the poor by hurting the rich. That's not how it works. I listened to Phil Graham one time who was a U.S. Senator from Texas at a Republican convention. He got there and he says, I never had a job from a poll man. And that's so true. I never forgot that. I've never had a job from a poll man. Now, this is so interesting to me when we're talking about now we got to fund LGA and CPA all of a sudden. Where were you last year? Where were you last year when the governor's budget came slashing millions and millions of dollars of CPA and LGA? And the DFL in the House, the DFL in the Senate supported that. You were supporting the governor's budget, slashing LGA. Who said no? We are not cutting LGA or CPA. Who said no, 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 until they finally went with me and said, I guess he's serious about this. We're not cutting LGA and CPA. Why? Because it's the direct property tax increase. That's why this side of the aisle demanded that that not happen. Now all of a sudden we're getting religion. So we are making progress here. But my question is, how many times do you hear fair share? Nobody can define what that means. Nobody knows what it is, but people say it. How much is enough? How much do you need? I'll make a deal with you. I'll vote for this bill if you're done raising taxes. You're done. No more. No more. There are 4 fifth-tier bills out there in this legislative session. 4, all doing something different. But my question is, how much is enough? What is the fair share? You take an $18 billion surplus. You take $10 billion in tax increases, and that's not enough. I begged my friends on the other side of the aisle, okay, you're going to go blow some money, fine, I get that. But don't put it in the base. What did they do? They put it in the base. So now instead of a 50-something billion dollar budget, we got a $70 billion something budget. In 2023, I remember when the tax bill left the House with inflators on LGA and CPA. Now, if somebody's serious about that, you do that. It came back without inflators. Amazing, amazing. And one thing that I'm really, really concerned about, and well, first of all, the cities and the counties, they see unfunded mandates is their biggest problem. So when somebody said, look at unfunded mandates, yeah, that's their biggest problem. So what really concerns me, and I've already got my literature for the campaign being written saying Greg Davids killed the 5th tier. It's already in there. But one thing we're doing here is we're providing false hope. We had the Honorable Mayor, my good friend, Mayor Herr here, testifying on something that's not going to happen. Why do we do that to people? Why do we do that to people? It's not going to happen. I'll guarantee it, and I'm for imprint sure on this one. It's not going to happen, okay? So I don't know why we create false expectations. We have the Honorable Mayor of St. Paul coming in, testifying for something that is not going to happen. I'm just not sure why we do that. So I respect the chair. We're not going to vote on this today, but boy, I sure wish we could. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're going to go to Representative Hollins, but we have to do a little bit of correction of some of the revisionist history. There was no point at which the House DFL had a position to cut LGA and CPA last year, and that is true. You said the governor. You can say what you will about the Senate, who put that in their bill. The House DFL was steadfast in protecting LGA and CPA. And as you mentioned, yes, in 2023, we not only did we add an historic amount to both LGA and CPA, and we proposed putting an inflator on it, because we are serious about this issue, Mr. Chair, and because we've consistently put forward legislation when we have the power to do so that increases equitable funding for our local governments. It's also interesting to me that we only ask, is this moving us closer to a deal or further away on days when I have the gavel? Because we didn't talk about that yesterday, did we? I don't believe so. We're only worried about how it's not going to happen when the beneficiaries of something are the working people of our state. When you propose massive giveaways to the rich and corporations, you don't seem to have those same concerns. How much is enough? How much is enough? How much is enough for the people who are hoarding wealth while the rest of us struggle to make our monthly bills? That's the how much is enough question that I believe we need to be asking in these bodies.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Chair.
since my name was invoked. Of course, all the bills we heard yesterday would get us closer to a deal, in my opinion. But second of all, I do want to set the record straight. You are absolutely correct. It was the Senate that proposed that in their bill. It was the governor. It was not you.
At least we can agree on that,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, we will agree on that. And probably not a whole lot else, but that's fine.
Indeed it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hollins, close us out, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the robust conversation. I have some stats about St. Paul if anybody wants to look at it. We contribute a lot more than what we get for LGA, so if you're concerned about that, happy to give you data on that. But I feel like I have to respond because I also wish we had taken a vote on this. We're calling this class warfare, and I'm like, don't threaten me with a good time. This is class warfare. I also have a quote, because I've heard a couple of them thrown around, by the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau: "When the people shall have nothing more to eat, they will eat the rich."
Yeah.
That was harsh.
As I stated previously, this bill modernizes Minnesota's income tax structure and it strengthens local government. It ensures that the wealthy support the good work that is being done across the entire state of Minnesota by all our cities and all our counties. I support this bill. I support taxing millionaires and billionaires. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hollins. And with that, Representative Hollins will renew her motion that House File 4845 be laid over for possible inclusion in the 2026 tax bill, and the bill is laid over.